Welcome back to Yield Today of Down Candland. I'm here with Drolshagen, and he helps people with living it more in their letting their subconscious speak more for them, and just coaching and all kinds of stuff. Alignment. He's the perfect guy for me to talk to right now. So thank you so much for coming, Joey.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation, Dallin. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, like what do you think of when you think of I'm just thinking of like water systems, like there needs to be clear flow or else it's going to get all super backed up. Like I was just on this walk and there's this nice little lake thing and it's like said on a sign like this needs upkeep. This needs to be taken care of. Do not put trash, dump, like this is not your place for trash. And so what comes to mind when you think of like the mind and stuff when it comes to like a water system?
Boy, you just nailed it, Dallin. Part of the thing is, and we'll get into different mindsets, for the total mindset and things, but really, it's our thinking, right? One of the things I'll do when I'm doing a workshop is ask the audience, how many of you would ever speak to another person the way you talk to yourself? And people will laugh at that, but it's so demeaning, or how many of you would ever let another person talk to you the way you talk to yourself? So when we look at our self-talk, when we look at the thoughts that we entertain, whether it be fear, doubt, worry, lack of faith, all these other areas and stuff, that's really what's determining the outcome of our life. It's determining how we get to experience this lifetime, but also the impact, how far our impact goes across the world with what we do. And so when we're looking at that, guard the portal of your mind. I think it was Wallace Wattles who said that, and it's so true. We have to be aware and understand what we're focusing on, what thoughts are we entertaining, the books we read, the people we hang out with, like all of that stuff is going to determine our life experience. And so often we just disregard that. And we get fear, doubt, and worry, and people will say, well, it's because of my situation or my circumstances, my bank account, my job, my whatever it is. But really, none of that, the situations never matter if we're not living a victim's life. To guard our mind, guard the portal of our mind. Be careful what we're focusing on and the words we use and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's Proverbs 4:23 that says like guard the heart. That's like where everything else flows from. So it's like if your heart is getting all kinds of craziness, like good luck, because I think there's another scripture that says like in the abundance of the heart, that's where the mouth speaks. So like if your heart doesn't feel loved or doesn't feel appreciated or something, it's going to show in how you speak and how you talk and how you act, and you're just going to see that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I look back at last year where I was at, living in Alaska. And one thing I did was I wrote some like little messages to myself that I would listen to. And one of them talked about how I listen and I use my ears to like basically bring my thinking to those of champions. So I get to listen to those kind of thinking. And that's powerful though. Those are powerful reminders. Like, well, what is your coaching and what does your expertise and belief go to as far as subconsciously like training yourself?
Absolutely, and you talked about that, and that can be affirmations, it can be it can be scripture, it can be different areas and stuff. But every individual or organization that I work with, I've worked with corporations who are like, 400 and some employees, $100 million organizations in bankruptcy. And part of my task was to help get them back into profitability, and doing that in a matter of months and such. And in that, every one of those areas, what I've learned is what I call developing a dynamic vision for life, developing a dynamic vision for your business or your life. And really a dynamic vision will include all areas of your life, your health and your well-being, vocation, time, money, freedom, relationships. It includes it all. And then what it is we start putting that vision on and we start living through that vision rather than living through the situations and circumstances that are showing up. And here's why it works so well. Our vision is our truth. Our vision, the only way to truly develop a dynamic vision is it has to be through that spiritual connection. It has to be through that God connection that we do that, because it's utilizing our imagination, which is one of our mental faculties, and it's using our intuition, which is how we get the guidance to bring it about. So it's tying all that in. So once we get into that vision becomes our truth. The situations, circumstances, and conditions around us, so often people live in those being their truths. But all those are as facts. They're just snapshots in time. So having a vision gives us an elevated place to live by. And, you and I talked about this up front here is we can be pushed by our pain. We can be pushed by our pain of the situations, circumstances, conditions we don't like. Or we get into this vision mode and we start getting pulled through life, where things start happening easier and things start having deeper meaning, and we can have a bigger impact and all that. So that's really when you talk about that. And I do have my clients take their vision. We take the full vision, which can be multiple pages. We decipher that down like we're paying $10,000 a word and really get it down to a power, 3-4 minute thing, 5-minute thing. And then I have them record that in their voice on their phone, and at any time they can be listening to themselves speaking their vision. That's so powerful.
It's important to remind yourself kind of what you're shooting after, and that can, help your brain be open to like what you're looking for. Like for me, when I pray and I'm like, hey, help me out to like find somebody to talk to that I could lift up, or help with this specific podcast interview or something. Now my brain, every part of me is like looking for that. And so, it says in Matthew 7:7, seek and you'll find. And
yes.
So there's so much power in just that. And what the vision does is it does a lot of the seeking for you, and you just have to kind of continue in that process. It's a beautiful thing, especially when people don't realize what's going on, and you're just kind of like, no, I'm getting closer to this. This is cool. And it's just a different feeling.
It's really the difference between achieving the things that are important to us and honestly living mediocre lives in exchange for it. And I'm amazed at how many people I come across, because that's one of my leading questions when I meet somebody and get to talking with them and stuff is, man, what would you love for your life? What's something you would love to experience in your life? And it's amazing, Dallin, how many people can't answer that question. They don't know what that is. And so if we don't know the target, it's just like with scripture and things like that. You can know them, you can memorize them, you can throw them out there and stuff. But if you don't know them, what's guiding you forward? It's the same thing with our vision, which pulls all of that stuff together into our life walk.
Yeah, blows my mind. I've had some experiences where just trying to get off on the right foot, because I talk to so many people as they go out and about. I love trying different questions. I remember asking this one guy, it's like, what's something really cool that happened this week? He's like, I don't really know, man. I'm like, what? Like, I could give you tons of experiences because I track all this. I have journals and stuff, and I think of this as a treasure, because at some point my future kids will be like, okay, this is where he was at this age, this age, and this age, and this is where a lot of other things happen. And you can see there's a clear, like, a thread there. But for me, there's just so much value in writing those things down.
Yes, absolutely. And it was funny because when I was growing up and I grew up Christianity, I think I mentioned to you, aside from the coaching and author and things like that, I'm a minister. And so I serve, I deliver services and such. And growing up, like, I thought if somebody had a miracle happen in their life, that it was like, wow, there's something really special about this person and stuff. And there is, but I didn't realize I carry a little one of those little miniature composite books now, with the cow cover to it and stuff. I always say the black and white, and it's my book of miracles, and I'm writing in there multiple times a week. And just like you said, all of a sudden something will happen, and it'll be like, oh, this is awesome, this is great, and then it leads to something, and it's like, oh wow, I could see how it unfolded in that process. And then the other thing with the miracles, when we start tapping into that, when we start connecting with that, that's where life just gets so fulfilling, and the impact we have can get so huge into what we're doing, and it's just absolutely amazing how we do that. And then we start living from that place of being pulled forward into that and experiencing more miracles and helping other people to do so, and things like that, versus living life in struggle.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to living from an abundance mindset as far as like being like, I have all these really valuable experiences. I'm going to remember them. You know, I took this study skills class first semester at BYU, Idaho. One of the biggest things I took from that was like when you're studying and you go back to your flashcards or whatever, think of it as kind of like a rehearsal. Like you get to remind yourself of all these different things. And so I do something similar to you with going back through some of those things. And I kind of remind myself of all these ways that, you know, that God's helped me out. And that's powerful. And that for me sometimes just really like lifts me up. And then I'm able to do something that maybe was difficult to do. And that can really, like going back to the water example, like that can really get the pump going again.
Yeah, and what I found the difference, and then here's where it made a big key difference, because I grew up in a very low income blue collar family outside Detroit, Michigan, and I watched my mom and dad just beat themselves working as many hours as they could, just trying to make enough money to get by and such, you know. And at some point, before I was 10 years old, I had this thought like, man, you people are not living right. This isn't what I'm, you know, understanding the Bible and all this stuff to be. And so I'm not going to live like you guys. And then I found myself in my 20s repeating those same patterns, and I couldn't figure out why. And at 23 years old, I had this really strong desire come up from my heart that I wanted to inspire, motivate, and lead millions of people to living better lives, to living deeper Christianity principles and stuff. But I didn't know how to do that myself, Dallin. And so at that time, I became a student of the works I do today. And as I started going through there, you know, what you talked about, the vision, the affirmation, it can be vision boards, whatever it is, all of it, listening to motivational things and stuff, it can all just be words if my subconscious is focused on lack and hardship and things like that. So I could not figure that out for a long time, and I'm doing all this stuff of listening to these things, and I'm writing and I'm repeating. And back in the day, kind of show my age, I had one of those little cassette recorders, and I would just say my affirmations about myself over and over and over until I'd use up a whole side of a tape. But when I went to bed at night, I would play that tape, you know, to fall asleep to and such, and but it never made any difference. Later on, about 15, 18 years ago, when I realized, so we have a conscious mind, right? And the conscious mind is the words we use, thoughts we entertain, all of that we have control over it. That's where the knowing part of what we want in life comes from, okay? Like an iceberg, where a majority of it is below the waterline, the conscious mind is only responsible for 5% of our life experience, which then means the subconscious mind that we don't have control over is the other 95% that determines our life outcome. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me at this point, yeah.
Yeah, and the subconscious mind, all it does is absorbs whatever the conscious mind is focused on. And then within the subconscious mind, there's this motherboard that holds all of our programmings, our beliefs, our patterns, our paradigms, which are systems of habits. It holds all of that. But then within that subconscious mind triggers the brain waves to the actions we take or don't take. So the doing part of our life is coming from the subconscious. So if you look at somebody who has negative self-talk, things like that and everything else, but they know what they want in life, you can see why there'd be that knowing, doing gap in their life. Understanding, identifying, becoming aware of what's in that subconscious that's causing limitation, and then shifting that is how you close that gap and start bringing things forward with ease, without all the exhaustive effort, massive actions, and everything we're conditioned that we have to do in order to achieve something in life.
It's beautiful. And I'm a little curious because I feel like I'm at that point where I'm starting to like, you know, vibes and energy and stuff are elevating. I'm getting more clear in what I want to do, who I want to talk with. And I'm probably going to be starting to speak at high schools and stuff pretty soon, just about things I've learned and hopefully inspire some people that are in a similar spot because I have empathy for those people. And also I've been doing a lot of writing and whatnot, but kind of bring us back to where you got started. Was it speaking at, you know, a school here and there? Or was it going to a business, or what was the thing that fell into place to make that start happening?
You know, I heard a minister speak. His name was Jack Bowen. He's passed away, you know, since then. And honestly, I don't remember what he said. I don't remember the words he said, but I remember sitting there and this thing lit up inside of me, man. It just consumed my body, the heat of it, and And I knew that the purpose of my life was to inspire, motivate, and lead people to living better lives. I walked out of that church really excited, but I didn't know anything of what to do. And I truly became a student of the works I do today is when I went deeper into scripture. I went deeper into Wayne Dyer. I went deeper into Deepak and all of these people and started getting into programs and started really learning and understanding. I've tried a lot of different things in that process and it was really kind of like, I mean, I worked while I did that, but it was almost like my life works I was doing, and I've continued to do that all the way through today. You know, I still do that. So it really started out as a true student, and the really, I guess, good thing in the sense of what I've gone through is I've been my test monkey. You know, I've been the guinea pig in my life for all of the stuff I do, and what took me years to achieve, I can help people do in weeks now. So it's really kind of brought together. And for a long time, I struggled with things like The Secret and things like that, the, you know, universal principles and law of attraction and things like that. But it never got me anywhere. And I was the most positive thinking person that I knew. People would compliment me on that all the time, but it never brought any of the results of what I was looking for in that impact. And it wasn't until I realized the subconscious and the part that plays. Once I understood that, within 4 weeks, I had launched or birthed IFGT Life Coaching. The IFGT stands for It's Frickin' Go Time, and that's the name of my organization, and everything is built under that. And within another month and a half from there, I had resigned. We got new owners in the corporation and stuff, and I was like, okay, I'm done now. And I moved down here to the mountains of South Carolina, and I've been building ever since. But it really took a while to get the pieces and understanding of the whole thing together to develop what is now the SMT method.
That's cool. Yeah, it's beautiful to me how you were patient with yourself as you're building and you went back to that vision. Like you said, you've been doing this stuff yourself. And it's interesting to me because I was on this way back from this walk and I was like, okay, I can go straight and this eventually leads back to my house, or I can take this other path that might be longer. And what I felt in my soul was like to go the path that was longer. And I'm like, well, I know I don't have a ton of time. I need to be on time to this interview. But then once I went on that path, I came across this like little water spot. And then I was just like, interesting. And now I've already talked about it here. And then when I was walking, I realized there was this way I could go that would like cut behind somebody's house that I wasn't thinking of doing, and I'd make it back even earlier. And so I think there are a lot of shortcuts in life, but usually they're ones that are kind of opened up to you, and it's just sort of like for a moment kind of thing. That's how I see shortcuts. Is I played a lot of Mario Kart growing up, and there are those shortcuts that are there every lap. And I don't really think that's the case with life a lot of the time. There's some doors that are open, and they can be like kind of a shortcut. Like there's somebody that could share some perspective with you or put you in touch with this person, but that's not like a super open door thing. You know, anything can happen. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I really, God, I'm just so blessed and grateful it's worked out the way it did. And it wasn't by my actions it worked out this way. I don't coach anybody through you do A, B, and C and you get D. The way I coach people, you know, you talk about that with the shortcuts and things like that. You know, sometimes the longer path is what gains the greatest gains in somebody's life. And so I tell every client I work with, I don't know your pathway, but what I'm really good at is helping you to develop that vision, start stepping into it and being aware of what that pathway is. So when I get done working with somebody, because I only work with people for so long because I don't want like a codependent thing or lifetime clients or things like that. So my goal is to get in there, you know, IFGT, get in there, help people now, get them to get those big steps and then move whatever that next thing is from there to go forward into. And so in doing that, like every client, and I've worked with almost 1,000 clients over the past decade, and every single one has been a unique journey for them and for me to get to take them on than somebody else. There's some commonalities with the programming and stuff, you know, the subconscious conditioning, but the journey itself is unique. And when we start opening that up, it's just amazing how it works over and over. You and I were talking ahead of time, you know, you can read scriptures today from so many years ago and it still holds true and it still fits into my life. And then you and I can have a conversation and it fits into your life. And it really is, you know, live scripture. It's not something that happened. It's something that happens. And
Ooh,
when we can get into that flow of that, man, life is, oh my God, it's just like I get goosebumps. It's so exciting to see that in my life or somebody else's life.
I agree. Yeah, it's the living word. So like you could be going through a really crazy time and some scripture, could all of a sudden hit in a completely different way. One I think about all the time is Matthew 6:21. It just says, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." And so that goes along with a lot of our focus, a lot of what we want to accomplish in life. And so we get to choose what is going to be the treasure, what is going to take up the lion's share of our time, and that is going to lead to all these different outcomes and a lot of things that we're talking about here.
And where we're putting our attention is where we're placing our intention, right? And so when we start going through that process, and I was telling you ahead of time, I refer to this up here, my logical mind, I refer to it as the Antichrist. And the reason being is so long I tried to live my life and figure it out and strategize it in the exhaustive to-dos and actions and everything else to try to bring that life around. It just made it so much harder, and I never got the gains in there. And what I've realized is I cannot live through my God Center. I cannot live through that Holy Spirit, that connection, and up here at the same time. The purpose of this, of the mind up here, is to help us solve complex problems. So when we get a creative idea that comes through our intuition of creating a trifold, I just had this happen this morning. It's like, man, I want to create these trifolds that I can take to the places I'm going to a workshop and just leave some copies there. So coming up with a design for that, now I got to use my logical mind for that. And so that helps me to be the creative and know what I want to put and how I want to word it and things like that and stuff. But then that's the end of it. Then it's done. So at first I had to shut this down. I had to shut down the logical mind or Antichrist and really get into this. And I did that. I literally would just sit and say, unless I get an intuitive action, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to write and I'm going to be in scripture or I'm going to read something positive and I'm just going to stay in this place. And as I got an idea, then I would take it and then I would go back to that place and I would take it's become more, as I practice it more of a flow where it's happening, and I no longer have to go into that quietness of all that stuff to have that happen. But what a difference it is. And then I start using the mind the way it was intended to be used to help me solve complex problems. Make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. And, for me, I'm always trying to think of better ways to understand these concepts because they can be pretty deep. So I try to come up with like analogies and stuff like that. And I don't take credit for it. I think they just come and I'm like, okay, that's cool. For me, I think of deep thinking versus overthinking. I love deep thinking. I love deep conversations when we're able to like talk and we go into these deeper levels. I feel like those are generally based in truth, things we already understand, and then we can connect these pieces together, and that's really cool. The overthinking is generally where I look at things I don't really understand and I try to make sense of them, and now we're looking over this beautiful thing and I don't understand any of it, and now we're frustrating ourselves. And so that's where I would agree with the logical mind being something that can be quite detrimental is when we're trying to make sense of stuff. And sometimes we just need to let life be. Let life be. We don't have to have anything super crazy happen. It's just enjoy what you have today. And I think it's especially hard with the youth of today and others that have all this free time and they feel like I have to occupy this time with this most super productive method or the only one and only thing or whatever. It's like, no, God's gonna help you with that. And when you take simple actions like what you were saying, I mean, that's gonna open the door for stuff that you didn't even know was possible. Like nobody else can predict that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and part of the whole thing, living from the logical mind, figuring out life and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it and how it's going to work out and everything else, all that really does is blocks, like intuition. It blocks it coming through me to me rather than me figuring it out. So what happens is I'm spending all this time spinning my wheels, and this is one of the things that's pretty common in the clients I work with because of what you said. Sitting still can be very uncomfortable, right? Unless we call it meditation, sitting still and not having some action feeling like it's leading forward can get uncomfortable. So we do anything. And what happens when we do that, our intuition in every living, breathing person works perfect, but it's only as loud as our willingness to listen and to hear it. So that means I have to slow down. I can't be taking those massive actions, exhaustive efforts, doing 150 miles an hour through life and still be receiving those. But what happens when I receive those is those out of the blue moments, or like a coincidence. We know there's no coincidence, but what people call coincidence is where something just all of a sudden just comes to us and works out, or we get a thought of an action. I've learned that my intuition comes to me. It's a feeling with an action attached to it. That's the best I can explain it. And whenever I've taken those actions, they've led so much further than anything I can come up with up here. So if that's the case, and I know that and I experience that, why do I want to do 150 miles an hour? Why don't I want to live in more peace? Why don't I want to build my spirituality by spending time in nature? Or like for me, hang gliding. I love getting up in the air on a hang glider and just being, human being. But we live so much of our life as human doings, trying to get things done and such.
Yeah, life is to be enjoyed, not just endured, as Gordon B. Hinckley would say. It's interesting. It'll be fun to revisit this conversation because yesterday was a momentous day for me. I have a friend who's been reading my LinkedIn stuff for a while, and he's like, "Hey, man, I really like what you're doing with your writing, and I'm trying to work on this college essay, and I really don't want you to just help me. Like, I'll pay you for it." And so I got paid for something I love doing, and I got paid more money than per hour than I've ever made with really any other thing. And it was only like 90 minutes of work, but I was like, it's interesting to see if me staying on this path, like where it's going to lead to, because there's still jobs I'm applying for, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to revisit this conversation because there are so many other opportunities out there.
And when you look at that, like right there, that would be something I'd put in my miracle, my little notebook. And the reason being is, okay, more money per hour than you've ever made. Doing what you love doing. And here's a clincher. Could you have put that together through your logical mind? Could you have strategized and figured out how to do that through your logical mind, Dallin?
Absolutely not.
No way. No way. But somehow you're in that flow of that. You got some excitement that you want to experience something like that. I'm sure is somewhere within you. And then what we do is we just stop blocking it. So many people will talk about how you got to allow and everything else and stuff like that. But really, all we got to do is stop blocking it. If we're not blocking it, we can't help but for it to come through us.
Yeah. So with your speaking so far and your coaching, what would you say have been some of the biggest things that do the blocking, and how do we take care of those?
Yeah, even our subconscious conditioning. We're born into it, right? And we don't get to pick where we get our conditioning from. It starts with our parents, goes on to our siblings, goes on to our teachers, and it just continues to grow. Even now in this conversation, you and I are programming our subconscious conditioning right now. Sometimes you could be shifting those things and happening, but your subconscious is always absorbing what the conscious mind is focused on. So that's why I love having these conversations, because it focused my conscious mind on stop blocking, allowing and living in that blessing of this life and having that impact, doing what I love doing. So as we're doing that, and as we're having this conversation, and again, we got the conditioning we got, right? I mean, even the people gave us our conditioning, they were doing the best they could for us so we can let them off the hook as well, But like if you grew up in my family, which is, like I said, very low income, blue collar, things like that, we had a different upbringing than somebody like, somebody famous would have had, like their children would have and stuff in that conditioning. But when we're going through it, in fact, our conditioning is unique to us. I have 4 siblings. When we talk about the stories and the things that happened growing up and stuff like that, all 5 of us have a different perspective of those situations. And that's based on the conditioning. And so what happens is, and that's the number one thing that stops us, because we know what we want, but we're not taking those actions. Somebody that's worried about finances and things like that, they'll never take actions. They have a much harder time taking actions to invest in themselves to change that financial situation because of the way they're living financially. So it will block them from that. So when we understand that, and then we can go in there and shift those perceptions, change that program, do things like what you're talking about, have that vision and be reinstilling what that new story is, that empowering story. Now all of a sudden we'll start changing the subconscious. As we do that, 95% of our life experiences is coming from the subconscious. We start noticing different things in our life experience on the outside. It has to start inwardly and work outwardly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I kind of go back to you know, seeing that experience as the miracle was for me, and what kind of had to lead up to it. A lot of it was continuing to press post on some posts that I was like, I like this, but nobody else does. But this guy was reading them and was like soaking it in, loving it, and just more or less getting prepared to make that ask. And it's humbling too, because I think when I did door to door, I worked as a installer. And so technically I made more money in an hour one of the times, doing that. And, but it's like, was that something I really loved doing? Like, was I really truly invested? Was I in the flow state? No, not definitely not. And if I was, it was not as long and as consistent and as like sustained as it was yesterday, when I was just in the mode, in the zone. I was just knew what I was doing, but I didn't know how it was working. And then I just put it out there. I was like, that's it, that's done. And it was beautiful, man.
Yeah. And that, when I was in corporate, America, and I have a 28-year career up to a vice president of sales. I shared that, built huge territories. I was really good at what I did. And I was conditioned from a young age that a man gets a job, supports a family, and hopefully lives long enough to enjoy some retirement. So everybody before me had gone that pathway of getting involved in the company, staying there as long as you possibly can, and hopefully you get to retirement age. And if you don't, then you go somewhere else, but always trying to get to that retirement age where you can then enjoy life, right? And I was really good at what I did. I was really good at building territories and sales. I was really good at leading teams. And I was ended up being really good at leading organizations back into profitability, but it took a heavy, heavy toll. I don't know if you've ever been through that with an organization in bankruptcy, but man, did it beat me up. But in doing that and going through that process and stuff, if I had to be in the office beyond past 5 o'clock 2 nights in a row, man, I was ticked off. I was tired. I was fatigued. I was annoyed. I was all this stuff and everything else. There's times I'll go through my whole day here, and at 9, 10 o'clock at night, I have a room right next to this, adjacent to this, where I do all the filming and stuff from. And I'll go shoot and do filming on something I'm trying to put together and do it till 3 o'clock in the morning. And Dallin, I can't go to sleep when I get done because I'm so much on fire from it. That's the difference between the two, doing what we love to do. And I just want to go into this for a second because this builds through my religion, through the fabric of my being. Is the reason I'm so passionate about the works I do today is because I watched my parents struggle, and they didn't have these tools available. They didn't know about subconscious and conscious mind and all that stuff. And so I can't do anything for them, and they're past now, but I can't do anything for them, but I want to help anybody else who's going through that situation. And then one of my conditionings about that man gets a job and supports a family. In my 20s, I was married to my son's mom, and we had 2 pregnancies. And we had births at 24, 25 weeks, and they'd be on all this equipment and live for hours and then pass away. And then my son was born. And then we experienced 2 more pregnancies like that. So when I say my son is precious to me, he really is. On his first birthday, instead of being back home, spending it with him, I was in Indiana building a sales territory because I thought that's what a man was supposed to do. And so I know the pains of missing out on the most precious parts of our life in order to make money. And if I can help anybody not to do that, God, that just lights me up and fills my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's humbling. This is kind of just where I'm going. So feel free to say no, but like what was that kind of experience like for yourself after the fact? Like, hearing those as one, missing the birthday, and, what was the mind telling yourself? Like, where was your mind at that point?
That day, I always remember that day because I lived it in so much confusion. I was driving from place to place, calling on people and things like that, trying to sell stuff. I would cry in between. I'd have to sit out in the parking lot. I just felt so bad, like this. God, this isn't how it's supposed to be. And I didn't understand the subconscious at that point. So it felt like I was taking the right actions. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And even today, even in explaining that to you, Dallin, it touches on my heart. Like, that I missed that day of life. And now I've made up for that. My son and I have a very, very good relationship and stuff, but I still missed that moment of that day in my lifetime. And I don't want to miss any more of those moments. And I don't want anybody else to have to miss them either.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. Just like sometimes the simplest stuff can mean such a big deal to people. I remember my sister got back from school and she just finished middle school, and she was really excited about her yearbook and I didn't know why. Like she was so excited. And I was like, I sort of put that in my back pocket. And then I know I had other things I could do, but I was like, what, I'm just gonna give her some time. And I was just like, what excites you about this yearbook? And she opened it up. She's like, look, like they put the eighth grade here and the seventh grade here, and isn't that so weird? And we just had a good laugh about it. And she's like, look at all these times I'm in the yearbook, and she'll remember that. I'll remember that. And it was just a very special moment, and it came from no expectations and just being like, I'm curious about her emotion and she needs to get it out, because if we don't have a way to get out emotion, we're going to find ourselves not feeling very heard and frustrated. And that's a terrible place to create from. Well, it can be a good place to create from, to let all that stuff flow, but it's not a great place to just have like by yourself thinking, it's just not a great place.
Yeah, and even with that, we have two growth signals built into every one of us: our longings and our discontents. We have those longings for what we want to experience and the things we want to, experience in our life, and the discontents, simply where we're discontent in our life right now. And we all have those, and those are two growth signals to help spark us to grow. So the intention of our discontents isn't to create misery. It's not for us to get into a ditch with and live with and everything else. It's going, man, I'm discontent here. So what do I want? And change our focus to what we do want. But so often we get into that place of that. That's why, like financial situations, I can help people in a matter of months completely change their financial situation in doing that. But we have to understand that discontent, the only purpose of it is to help us find what we do want. It's not locking, and so many people get locked into experiencing that life. Fear, doubt, worry, things like that, and go to anxiety and depression and things that, it can, we know it can go all the way down to dis-ease, right? In life. And so they feel that and they don't know what to do. So they just continue to stay in that, and they'll talk about it and they'll think about it and they'll stay up at night worried about it and stressed about it and things like that, and it just brings more of those experiences on. So if we take our discontents and understand what they are, and then we understand that what we do want is going to be probably about 180 degrees from there, and we put our focus in there, all of a sudden we'll start experiencing more of that. And that's truly how I help people change their lives through transformation of the subconscious conditioning.
It's powerful. And as you go about living your life, you might get some messages from God, or from whatever you believe, and those can guide you and give you perspective for what you're experiencing right now. Last year there was a couple times where or more than a couple times, where I'd get some kind of message that would help me out. And one that helped me tremendously, I talked about on the podcast a while ago, was that like my pain was like guiding me. It was helping me. It was not holding me back or destroying me. It was actually how I was going to get to where I needed to be, because it was helping me understand, myself and who I was and what I enjoyed. And yeah, so there's a lot of power into, kind of diving deep into a shallow situation. If you feel like you're in not a great situation, well, you can still like go deep into yourself. Like the Magic of Thinking Big talks about this pretty well. Like, this guy kind of realizes, he kind of asks himself some of those questions, like, what do these people have that I don't have? And then he kind of goes through and he's like, oh, I could be a little bit more like proactive about situations, and I could be a little better about talking to myself. And downstream, it sounds crazy, But downstream, just those two things, being more proactive and talking better about yourself, it's going to lead to crazy, crazy, amazing stuff.
It will, and you hit on a really key point that is typically part of the transformation of every client I work with. Is it's that, you know, in the first book I wrote, Life's Lessons, I wrote in there that when I quit saying, why is this happening to me? Something would happen, it'd be painful, and it's not what I wanted. Instead of saying, why is this happening to me? I started asking, if life happens for me and not to me, I started doing some work on taking the judgment out of, so there's no good or bad, right or wrong, fair or unfair, any of that, and life is happening for me. What is this showing me? All of a sudden I could start learning from the experiences that were happening. And that's when we talk about failure. You know, Edison with 10,000 times of a light bulb trying to develop, you know, illuminate light. And they said to him, you know, what do you think of those 10,000 failures? He goes, no, I got 10,000 pieces of information telling me what not to do. When we look at that, that's all this is really. It's life lessons. We continue to experience, and then we learn and we grow and we continue to go forward in that expansion of that, you know, and things like that, like yeah, I have had huge. Now again, I would put them in the category of pushed by my pain, right? And I've been through quite a few of those in my lifetime. But when I started learning from those, all of a sudden it's like I could just start like launching into the life that, you know, that was the life I wanted to live, and I could use those lessons. But what happens is people will take things that happen in their life and take it as life happening to them, and then they start getting guarded and watching for that so that it doesn't happen again. So I work with people who have experience in a relationship, and a relationship goes bad. And instead of looking at, you know, instead of looking at why did, you know, what is this teaching me? What is this showing me? They started looking at how they were the victim of it. And those people typically have a really hard time experiencing a healthy love relationship. The people that look back at that and go, okay, what was my part, and what did I learn from that? Now all of a sudden they can go forward and be different in a relationship and be healthier in a relationship. Yeah, that was a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you're doing good stuff. We're having a fun time here. One question that's helped me a lot with finding those treasures is before whatever, if something crazy happened that was outside my control. You know, I got this from, I think it was the Danny Miranda podcast, one of those other podcasts. It said, you know, just say, this is the greatest thing that could ever happen to me. And then your brain is going to be like, how is this the greatest thing? It's like, well, you learned this about yourself. You figured this out. You got to feel this, and you got to understand this. And these are all super, super valuable things. And I can just tell you're such a treasure trove of knowledge and wisdom. Is there anything else you'd say for somebody that feels stuck, like just stuck in their life, and how do we get in contact with you? And
Yeah. Dallin, yeah, I would think, yeah, and this is a great conversation. Anybody that's feeling stuck, a lot of times it's through the struggle part of it that we're stuck in. And again, going back to those discontents, their only intention of where we feel discontent is to point us to what we do want. So look at where you're struggling. Look at where the struggle, what area that's coming from, and what do you want to experience there. And then just as an experiment, I love making experiments out of life with things, you know, and just for an experiment, write down. And the reason I say that is when we write things, we absorb it a different way than when we read it, than when we speak it, than when we hear it. So write it down. Write down what you would love to experience in the opposite, opposing to that, you know, that struggle. Write it down what that is, and then start getting your mind around it. Now, one of the things you said, you know, that all these works can really tap into God. It has to. It's impossible for any client I work with. It's impossible for anybody to truly experience a transformation without God direct involvement in their life. And the reason I say that is even once we get the vision, we test it. Does it require the help of a higher power of God to bring it to fruition? And if the answer is no, it doesn't, it's not a big enough vision. You know, do we know the how? Do we know how we're going to bring it about? If we do, that's a strategy coming from the logical mind. Our visions really, when you get into it, are so big, we have no idea how the heck we're going to achieve it. That's a powerful, dynamic vision. So once you get your vision, start putting that vision out. Start opening up your imagination. That so many of us are conditioned. I'm amazed when I do workshops how many people are unable to even speak their vision because they're so shut down in their imagination. But that's where all the magic and all the goodies are. That's where that connection with God is, into that possibilities with the scriptures that say this and even greater things shall you do. That all it's all tied into that. So look at your discontent. I'm just going to absorb. Look at your discontent. Write down a vision for what you want, what's the opposite side of that, and start putting that vision on. Start praying about that vision, but pray for it in an expectancy manner, not as a begging manner. And then just stop blocking it. Stop going back to the discontent and living in that, and just stay in the vision. Anytime that discontent comes up, bring yourself right back to the vision. Because a discontent just remind you that you don't have the vision built in big enough yet. So keep going back to that and see what happens. Anybody that wants to talk about this at all can schedule a session with me at coachwithjoey.com. And you can go on there and schedule a session, and we'll talk about this or talk about what's going on for you. And, even people, if you disagree with what I'm saying here, I love the conversations. Let's keep them going.
Yeah. I mean, you never know what a conversation can lead to. And I've seen that. I mean, just today when I was on my walk, I sort of felt like I should go walk into the Papa John's, and I just talked with the guy, and he's just kind of by himself. And I knew it was a Friday, and it's like, things are going to be kind of crazy maybe today, but you got this. I worked at a pizza place for a little bit, and, he's a cool guy. And it turns out he has ADHD like I do. And so we had a cool little conversation. So just being willing to lean into those things, even if it doesn't seem that cool. It's like God knows what is going to light you up, what's going to excite you. And so involving him, yeah, that is the play for sure.
Every time I do something like that, when you walked out of there today from that conversation, didn't you feel better than you did walking in?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
It's always circular. It works for everybody involved in it and stuff like that it gives gifts to, and blessings. It blesses everyone.
That's
agree. Awesome you did that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's cool. It's pretty cool. So we'll definitely keep chatting, but keep up the good work, and have everything in the show notes for you, and people can get in contact with you. And yeah, just keep up the good work, man. Thank you so much.
It's awesome. And everybody, just God bless everyone. Dallin, thank you for this conversation. It really adds value to my day.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say is just like, we can just bring this full circle. You can put good things in your mind intentionally, and that will lead to good things happening. And that sounds so simplistic, but I promise you it is 100% facts, because as you put the good things in, you're going to take more good actions. You'll understand how good you are, and that will lead to lots of good things. So
yeah, see, the more you can lean into focusing in on those good things you put in your thoughts and words, the more you can lean into that, the more the potential is it's going to show up, and the sooner it'll show up.
That was beautiful. So. That was a better ending for sure. Thank you, Joey. That was good. That was good. That was good. Thank you, man. That was awesome.
All right. God bless.
Yeah.